Julian, do you think that COVID has become big business?
Well, I think it inevitably has, but I'm actually relatively relaxed about that. I'm relaxed about people making money out of COVID. There's a great economist, Adam Smith, who wrote once that it's not because of the benevolence of the butcher or the baker that we get our dinner, it's because of their self-interest. And I think it's the same with many people providing the essential goods and services that we needed during the pandemic. It's because of the profit motive that we have as many vaccines as we do. It's because of the profit motive that lots of online companies have stepped up and filled in where the high street shops have not been able to do business as usual. And I also don't think it's quite as black and white, if I can still use that phrase, as your introduction suggested. So the fact that companies have made a lot of money from vaccines and from online shopping, that's meant also that's protected our health. A lot of these online platforms are actually vital for small businesses as well. So lots of high street shops now have an online presence. So it's not some massive winners and loads of losers. I think all of us can benefit from the free market economy, keeping us going, providing lots of choice, providing the goods and services that we need, and hopefully at lower prices too.
Well, there does seem to be quite a few people who did lose out. I mean, you had small businesses and you've got hospitality and all those sort of industries that seem to be losing out on this, especially if we end up in a situation where there's another lockdown, as it were, which I'm hoping will never happen again.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, though...
You're absolutely right. That's where the government does need to step in, because if markets can't work as normal, because businesses are being shut down in order to, frankly, to save people's lives, then I think there is a clear case there for the state to step in to subsidise those businesses. And of course, that's what the state has done through things like the furlough scheme, which I think is been one of the great policy successes of my lifetime. There's another area also, I think, where the government needs to be careful, though. I sort of talked up how effective markets can be. But there's an exception here when there isn't a lot of competition. And I think a lot of the contracts that the government has awarded don't seem to have been properly competitive ones. That was fair enough in the early days of the crisis, when the important thing was just to get things done as quickly as possible and maybe cut a few corners. But I think quite a few skeletons are going to come out of the cupboard, as some of them already are, over the next few months and years, of money that wasn't spent very well at all.
What about the idea that, whilst, yes, you said you were happy with these drug companies making money and all that because they're providing a service and creating a vaccine, but isn't this almost like a perpetual cycle which will carry on in this way? Because, as you said, there's very little competition in terms of the vaccine. They're all creating it. Ultimately, we could find ourselves in a place where it's actually more profitable to keep people getting the jab rather than finding a solution to actually getting rid of COVID altogether.
Well, again, that's a question of government policy, isn't it? I mean, if there is a risk, I suppose, that the governments continue to keep us in lockdown and scared of COVID because it's good for pharmaceutical companies. But I think that's an overly cynical view. I think most governments would far rather that they reopened their economies and we went back to our normal lives as soon as possible. And I think that's, again, being cynical, that politically is in the best interests of elected politicians. So I think that's where we're going to head up. In the meantime, frankly, if drugs companies or providers of PPE made a bit more money than usual by providing the goods and services that we desperately need during the pandemic, then I think fair enough.